it was affecting the creators too.
Atari was, I think, the epitome of the 70s Silicon Valley company. I mean, we sort of defined that kind of a lifestyle of not wearing suit and ties and still doing serious business.